ready. Speed at the bottom of the helix. Our next presenter is from San Antonio, Texas. He models the 1920 timeframe on the St. Louis and San Francisco, which we simply know as the Frisco. For the past 2 years, he has been constructing a portable sectional layout called the Crawford Cherokee, set in the southeast of Kansas. We welcome Mr. Bob Thomas.
Hey, thank you, Speed, and thank you for the invitation, Gordy. Marty, thanks for the help today. I'm going to go ahead and push my slides up, but before I do, I want to thank Dave for the previous talk and note that I put on my co-op hat in tribute to him. Oops. Okay, I'm just going to bring my slides up really quick here. All right, hopefully that's coming through. All right, well, good morning, everyone, and howdy from San Antonio, Texas. My name is Bob Thomas. I am a very short-time member of the NMRA, having joined just 3 years ago. I'm a member of the Lone Star region and Division 6, which is in South Texas. I'm a member of the Frisco and Mopac Historical Societies, supporters of both of those groups. You'll see that from the modeling. And I'm originally from this southeast Kansas area that I'm modeling. I'm going to give a talk today from the perspective of someone who's just getting started in this era of modeling, and also someone who just recently tore out an old layout in about 2 years ago, tried not only a new era, but also approaches for constructing a layout, and of course everything that comes with this pre-depression era modeling. I want to note here's a picture of Speed, not in the helix. He does come out occasionally, and there's a picture of me there with him at the Plano train show last year, which is a great time if you could make it when we're back up and having train shows again. All right, so let me first speak to the influences for the modeling that I'm doing now. And the first of which is during the 1980s, when I was finishing up high school, I had a summer job that was to be a tour guide for a mining museum that has this giant electric shovel in southeast Kansas known as Big Brutus. And what a fun job to have as a teenager to be a tour guide on this giant machine. It is still there if you make it to the area. And just for this, noting the scale here are 2 cars parked down in the near the tracks of this vehicle. So this was an electric shovel that would remove the overburden during strip mining. And it was interesting, the people of the area would say as it would take a scoop, the lights would dim in the area. So it made you wonder, hey, did this thing dig up enough coal to run the power plant to actually power it? But it's still a spectacular museum piece, and if you make it there, I would encourage you to go see it along with the museum that's nearby. The other thing that I'll note is, in addition to our family, who included many miners in this area in southeast Kansas, I was shown as a kid around, in the 1970s into the 1980s, it was the centennial of many of the towns in the region. And you'd see pictures like this. The little town you lived in would have pictures of an interurban going down the street and all of these buildings which are now gone. So this era, which boomed in the 1920s, is now really just an assortment of little towns that maybe have a store and a gas station, but really have populations of 400 or 500 in many cases. But a great place to grow up. The land that is there is now part of the state of Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. And here's a recent photo from Google Maps. You can see that here's a pin for Big Brutus. In that area, all of the pits that are now filled with water are hunting and biking and fishing lands that you can enjoy. And what a great place to grow up as a kid, having this right outside your back door. But as a kid, you did not realize what was behind all of that. You saw those places, and didn't realize from where all that came. So I tell people here in Texas that I'm from Kansas, and many people have the images, many of which Dave showed in his talk, of wheat fields, grain elevators, sunflowers, the sunflower state. And inevitably you get the question of, do you know Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz? But there are other perspectives growing up there in southeast Kansas, and that is the perspective of the mining community. Many of our family grew up being part of the mines, and really made their living from the area in that way. And here are a few photos illustrating that area and those boom times back in 1920, 1930s era. Interesting here in the left-hand photo on the Weir and Pittsburgh coal field, in many of the places the coal was at the surface when it was discovered. And so, it was natural to begin mining and extracting that in the 1870s, 1880s, because it was really readily available. And here's just a quick map of, when I say the Weir and Pittsburgh coal field, where it's at in southeast Kansas. So here are two of the most southeastern counties in Kansas, and they are Crawford County and Cherokee County. So the name of the layout comes from those two counties, with the track riding the border between the two counties on the Frisco. But you can see that this coal field spanned most of southeast Kansas into southwest Missouri. And although the detail is difficult to read on the map, there are many areas along the southeastern seam where the overburden was practically zero. And so mining became readily available and progressed through the years, and as they moved west, to more and more overburden, leading to these giant machines like the big Brutus I showed you earlier to remove that overburden and get to the coal. So my interest in the history of the region, having worked as a tour guide for a mining museum, really sparked the interest that today is, what a great way to bring it alive through model railroading and building a representation of the era. And part of that the choice to build a layout was picking a time, and really, what was the boom time of this area? Well, it was around the year 1910, 1920. About 1% of the national coal production came out of this coal field. So upwards of 700 million tons of coal were mined with the national 6 or 7 million tons of coal were mined when the national production was around 700 million tons. You can see peaking there near the end of World War II. One of the excellent resources that you have for modeling this area includes the Frisco.org website, a number of historical items from that area, including the Frisco Employees magazine, and several issues featured the mining and resources of this region, which are just an outstanding resource, not only for finding photos that are representative of the industry, but also we saw John's talk on signs. Those are filled with advertisements of the era, and you can find great material for making your own signs and advertisements within those. This really was the boom time of the region. It was this southeastern part of Kansas was not settled while it was a territory of the United States, and when Kansas became a state in 1861, it was largely still off limits, having been Native American lands. When coal was discovered and the folks flooded into the area, these towns like Pittsburgh, Kansas here in 1915 grew in 20 years to populations over 20,000. You can see in the street here, not only the railroad, but interurbans were built. A neat feature of the area there in southeast Kansas was the interurban for 5 cents. You could take a trip out to the Idle Hour Park, which had, if not the largest, one of the largest roller coasters in the United States at the time. Just a fantastic item that is no longer there today. But at the time was represented the wealth and the prosperity of the area. Sadly, meeting its end due to prohibition having been built by beer brewers. The support for the park was withdrawn when they were no longer allowed to sell beer there. You can also see the town south of just south of where I'm modeling is Columbus, Kansas, highlighting here, and this photo is from the early 1900s. 91 trains a day coming through the area, again representing the immense traffic and industry of the time. So that industrial base of southeast Kansas is summarized here. What you find is not only the coal fields of this Weir and Pittsburgh coal field that persisted for almost 100 years, but also in the area natural gas, the two of those providing fuel for the industry of the area. Interesting to the area, the largest sources of zinc in the area were mined just southeast of this region, and the zinc was transported by train to the coal in order to run the zinc smelters. And here you can see from a old Sanborn map in Cherryvale, Kansas, on the Parsons Sub at the Frisco, immense smelters were built for processing that zinc to be used for everything from brass to tire making to electrical components. Also in the area, as they dug coal, they also found clay and made brick and tile in several large brickyards in the area. And other things are shown here. And of course, with the railroad came large rail shops. If you're a fan of the KCS, you recognize Pittsburgh, Kansas. On the Weir and Pittsburgh coalfields, a large shop for the Kansas City Southern at one time. And Parsons, Kansas, just to the west of my model, was a large shop of the MK&T. And Frisco until 1927, when they had longer haul steam locomotives for the trains, had large shops nearby as well. So many components here available for representation if you're building a model railroad in the area. And so part of my choice here was determining what railroad should I pick. There are maps on the Kansas Historical Society, kansasmemory.org, and I really encourage you, if you're interested in any of the Kansas region, but also the Kansas lines, the Santa Fe, the Rock Island, a large number of photos and historical documents there. Here is a map that I had found showing you that you could just about have any track arrangement and call it prototypical on your model railroad for the southeast Kansas region. It may be difficult to read on my slide here, but the Frisco occupied this region, the Santa Fe, the Kansas City Southern, the Missouri, Kansas, Texas, Missouri Pacific lines, all present, as well as an extensive interurban, the Joplin and Pittsburgh, that spanned not only the two counties of the Crawford and Cherokee, but over into the Missouri side of the border in the Joplin area, two counties there near Joplin. So in considering the Frisco, part of the inspiration was the history of this line being part of the historic border tier road built in a race through Kansas from Kansas City southward in hopes of winning the rights to have an exclusive line through Oklahoma into Texas. And the map here reflects the history of the time, the branch at Fort Scott, avoiding at one time what was the Native American lands as those opened, and the Frisco losing the battle for those exclusive rights, taking a hard left turn into Joplin, into Missouri. This is documented as a great book here by Robert Collins. If you're interested in that, it's a nice afternoon read. Another factor in choosing the Frisco is take a look at the system maps of the line. So many opportunities for traffic, lines in the area going all directions, and certainly intersecting many of the towns that I knew as a young man. In looking through those system maps and maps of the region, look to find some items that would be interesting elements for a model model railroad. And here you can see, I was digging through those. Here is the intersection of the Afton subdivision and the Parsons subdivision in the town of Cherokee, Kansas, sitting right on the border of Crawford and Cherokee County, originally named McGee, later changed to Cherokee, only to find out that their town was actually in Crawford County, Kansas. So still holds that name of Cherokee. It had a depot there at the intersection of the two lines, yards that you can only assume were for marshaling the coal pulled from the region. And the maps provide a number of elements, a roundhouse, small roundhouse here, representations of the industries nearby. Along with that, in Cherokee historical archives, you can find photos of the station that was built here. So a grand station from 1888, built from brick, manufactured in the area, there at that intersection of the two subdivisions on the Frisco. This station was used into about 1948, having been built in 1888, and after disuse was demolished sometime just after August 1st, 1959. I want to thank the folks on the Frisco.org that helped me sleuth out the timeline for the existence of this station. There's another view of the station here, which gives you some insight into modeling. If you're choosing this to be part of an element on your layout, you see not only the station, but facing away from the tracks was the downtown area, and you see several of the buildings, including the hotels and two-story brick buildings there in the area, as well as the track that is the interchange over to the Parsons sub. You can also find representations of the photos of the old roundhouse that was there near the turn of the century. Just after the turn of the century, these old 10-wheelers from the Frisco being present, helping to inform you of what was some of the power at the time there on the Frisco. Being part of the Frisco Historical Group on Frisco.org, you see you have many friends, build many friends there, including here's a item that was provided by Carl Brand, a timetable from 1923 for the area. And here, if we look at the Cherokee station, you can see that the area was really a going concern at the time. Scheduled fast freights, local freights for the region, named first-class passenger trains such as the Meteor that is well known in the Frisco circles, Oilfield Special, and a Bull Moose motor car as well. So great opportunities for modeling the trains of the time from that information. I also found this map, which unfortunately north is not pointing upward, but to the south, to the bottom left, but it provided a number of layout design elements for the model railroad. You can see the named industries are here, and I've circled areas that I chose to represent on the layout. Here is the Cherokee Yard, part of the Cherokee Yard going southward on the Afton sub, interchange with the Afton sub here, a small yard for, as we said, probably for coal, in interchange with the Missouri Pacific, another mine just out of town, and a branch line that went down to Weir, Kansas, Weir City, Kansas, the namesake of the Weir-Pittsburgh coal field having started nearby. And this gave, for the model railroad, an option for a point-to-point to provide this branch line down to Weir City. Here's an old historic postcard showing the downtown, the station there at Weir. Just after the turn of the century, you see a horse-drawn wagon unloading or loading a boxcar here near the station, and some of the elements nearby. The switch stand here is for a Y that was in town, and this grand brick, 100-foot tall brick water tower, 120-foot tall brick water tower, which is still standing, built by the people there in one of the smelter areas for the zinc smelters. From the Kansas University of Kansas collection, you can find a number of maps for just about any town in Kansas, and really a good number for this just after the turn of the century time frame. And here is a Weir area showing you a small town that is really, I think, ideal for modeling. Back going to the left here, going north and back to the Parsons sub, a double track through town, a small house track, the industries represented and available for your modeling, as well as a Y to turn the train, turn your locomotive as part of your model. There's a few images out there from downtown Weir. Here you can see some images probably from the late 20s, early 30s, entering probably the Depression era. You see the tracks from the interurban in the area, the Joplin and Pittsburgh Railway, which surprisingly don't appear on the Sanborn maps, as well as the City Hall of the time, built in 1894. And in the background, in many of these photos, you see that 120-foot tall water tower, which is a good reference point when you're trying to determine, where in the town am I looking when you find these old photos. Where are they relative to the railroad? A number of the industries that appear in that map are also excellent candidates for building a layout. We have the Weir City Brick Company, which persisted almost for 100 years. And I posted a photo of this and the model that I was building on the Frisco Facebook page for the modelers. And sure enough, a guy came back and said, "Oh, I worked there, worst job in my life." So brought back bad memories, but really an excellent candidate for the model railroad. Also in Weir was a Long Bell Lumber Company, which was one of the first companies in the United States to have vertical integration from harvesting the trees through milling and distribution. And here is a photo of almost an identical layout in Altus, Oklahoma for a Long Bell Lumber, as it appears on the map in Weir. And then also, feed mill, you saw from Dave's talk at the time, another excellent candidate for the model. And so from all of that information, we built some layout design goals. My past investment in HO scale led to that choice. I really have limited space constraints. Here in San Antonio, you don't have a basement. A Texas basement is often a euphemism for your garage. There are no fixed backdrops. This is a portable layout, and I really enjoy building the sections of this sectional layout and using it as diorama for photographs. Something that would be reconfigurable, so a sectional or modular layout, which allows you to work in small bites. Ken Anderson, who was part of the Sipping and Switching Society, I heard him on a podcast endorsing this waffle bench work, which is very strong and light, and so chose this as the candidate for building this current layout, and it's really done well. Narrow bench work, a walk around style that is common for a sectional or a modular layout. Point to point with no duck unders. My previous layout had a duck under, which was maddening. Flat, no grade. Hey, we're in Kansas. And not too much track for the layout. I'm a big proponent of less is better, and a layout that provided plenty of space for visitors and operators. And so, having decided on the portions of Cherokee, Kansas to include an area where I could represent that ground, the 1888 station, portions of Weir, representation of the coal mines in the area, provide 4 or 5 jobs for operators, these interchanges with the MOPAC, and a time frame here in the late 20s and an area that would allow for realistic but 4 to 6 car train on that branch line. And so here's the layout, the plan for the layout. Represented as the series of sections that are built in chunks of anywhere from 7.5 feet to paired 3.5 and 4.5 feet, which allow you to stow the modules on end and still be lower than the ceiling. The layout includes this mine area in the southeast part, that Cherokee yard, the diamond there in Cherokee, interchange with the MOPAC, and around to the branch line in Weir. Visitors came by. I added this brickyard as a reason to have yet another train and increase the operational ability of the layout. The layout is built with code 83 and code 70 track, and ran into Kevin Marks at the Kansas City train show a couple years ago, who convinced me that I could use a pair of fixtures and build almost the entire layout with a crossover fixture for number 6 turnout, which I have done. Micro engineering track, controlled by DCC and JMRI, switch list generated by JMRI, including a routine for pulling cars out of storage and into the interchanges, which serve as sort of an online staging. In the era 1920, you'll see that I'm honing in on that, but really models that I have span sort of 1920 plus or minus 10 years. A little bit about the progress on the layout. What I'm showing today is certainly a work in progress. The sections that I showed in that plan are constructed. We're still working on building a short staging area. The ground cover and scenery is in, as you'll see, with tracked ballasted. And my current focus is building structures and detailing scenes. So I really enjoyed the talk earlier today on signage. That's going to come in handy as that is being done. Rolling stock, a good deal of rolling stock that's built and weathered, and needs some refinement. It's in the ballpark of this era, but certainly needs to be honed in on a more specific date. Here's just a few ideas of what that construction is like. The waffles or torsion box structures shown here are built entirely glued together. There's no hardware in them at all, but this spine structure in a box with webbing is incredibly strong, built on a center frame that is a 1/2 inch thick piece of plywood, 3/4 inch ends at the frontiers between the modules, and the rest being 1/4 inch Luan plywood. It's very flexible, very strong, and with 1 inch pink foam on the top. Extruded foam allows you for some landscape and formation. Here you can see one of the sections on its side. One of the great things about building your layout in this way is also the ability to hoist the modules up on the sawhorse and work on your wiring without having to climb underneath the layout. And here you see I'm installing switch machines and turnout controllers, things of that nature. One of the things I've done is I've kept the bench work clean. There are no buttons or switches of any kind on the fascia, other than an indicator of the turnout number, with switches being thrown from throttle on the cell phone. Here you can see a few months ago when I had the layout set up, the mine branch is missing on one end here. But you can see that the size of the layout was picked to basically fill the 2-car garage when empty. Here's another view from the Weir City end, and again, this photo was taken before the brickyard section was added. But you can see that the layout is largely like a shelf layout when assembled. A narrow 18-inch shelf around the walls, this Y being a peninsula to allow you to turn your train. So here's just a few scenes, certainly staged with a skyboard behind modules used as dioramas, because layouts built without a fixed and permanent background. But here you can see the track is down, the scenery is in, and we have a train in Cherokee heading north towards that diamond at the intersection of the two subdivisions of the Frisco. I seem to have this slide out of order, but from here I'm going to walk around, show you scenes walking around the layout counterclockwise from the mine area through Cherokee and around to Weir City. The mine scene has been rebuilt. One of the things about a sectional layout is you find yourself unhappy with one version, and rebuilding it is what you hope is a better version. I've just recently completed and have scenery in on the Lightning Creek mine, and here you see the track plan and locomotive spotting some cars. The steel hoppers would have appeared on the Frisco in the late 20s, and if we wish to include those, we're going to have to set our time frame more narrowly in the late 1920s here. So Bob, where is the mine? You'll see later in the video that the mine is being built from A&B kit, bashed A&B kit for this area, an old wood structure of a shaft mine. Walking around the layout, we have next the South Cherokee section. Looking into you can see a ridge has been built with a number of trees. This allows this module to be borrowed scenery for photography. Turning it around, having that ridge with trees can be paired with another module and give you a little more feeling of depth as you're taking photographs. The Cherokee yard shown here has 1 yard track that is enough for 7-8 cars, plus industries and a few other off spots. So certainly enough room to hold cars to build small, short trains that go out on the branch line into Weir City. The South Cherokee module shown here, as I mentioned, I often use it not only as a diorama for photography, but turning it around, use it for backdrop in other photos. You'll see that as we go through the photos here. Let's see. As we progress around the layout, we go around through near where there's an interchange with the Afton subdivision, as well as an interchange with the Missouri Pacific. Here you see a train headed out to the branch line with cars on that interchange track there at the Missouri Pacific interchange. Going on along the line, we included a scenic element of the Brush Creek, which had a ballasted trestle built from Frisco civil engineering diagrams. The ballasted trestle here is 60 or 70 parts when built against that diagram, but provides a nice scenic element as well. From there, we have the branch line that goes off of the Parsons sub into Weir City. Now, this section entering into Weir would have been a line of 2 or 3 miles, but with compression is just immediately off of that branch line. And also, a Young's mine from the earlier map of Cherokee is represented just as a lead to spot cars for a mine and another mine in the area. So I'm very sorry, I'm over-clicking. And then you come into the Weir City. Here's a view from the end of the Y into the town. Here, many of the structures are stand-ins for things that I intend to build from craftsman kits, structures from the previous layout. But you can see a Y on a peninsula used to turn the trains, a small depot with a warehouse or freight, grain elevator, etc. in the area. And then the further south of Weir is a brickyard, the brickyard represented by a couple of short spurs. And here you see one of the 10-wheelers spotting some boxcars there in the area. Again, with the scenery largely in, but some kilns to be built. So for the layout, you look through your historical references and you look to find examples of power and rolling stock you can find that you can use. The Frisco Archive just has a great collection of photographs, and many friends. Thanks, Steve, for sending representations of some of their own favorites here, the QA&P boxcars. So look through reference sources and consulting experts on what would have been likely and available as a model for this layout. And here you see a list of, looking at the weight restrictions that were present in the region at the time. You're looking at 440s, 10-wheelers. In nearby Joplin, Missouri, there are several photos of 060 switchers, so those are available. Consolidations were common, and the Bachman consolidation, the Baldwin, is an excellent match for the Frisco. And of course, the decapods in the region were later sold to the Eagle Pitcher Corporation in northeastern Oklahoma, and the assumption is that they were largely present in this area as well. 2 surviving Frisco locomotives are out there, one at the Illinois Railway Museum, one of the decapods, as well as an old consolidation that I think is 1907, 1908 built, ex-Frisco, on the Alberta Prairie Railway. So here are just a few model examples. We have a brass locomotive, a 10-wheeler that's an accurate representation of 10-wheeler in brass from Don Worth. The stand-ins from Bachman are a little less accurate, but certainly operate very well. Here from my collection, you see a Hallmark model, a consolidation built by and decorated by, painted and detailed by Don Worth. Keith Robinson sent me this photo of representative 04 or 440 that would be appropriate for the era and the area. Also have plastic models available. Here's an example of this, the 060 that's available from Proto Heritage, which is a fairly accurate representation of the Frisco's oil burner, but is missing the herald on the front of it. That is going to have to be fixed. And then, as I mentioned, that Bachmann consolidation is an excellent representation. Here you see the 1241. It's very similar with the doghouse tender that was modified by Tom Hawley and Keith Robinson, some pair of them that I can never remember, which provided what. Also, the 10-wheeler from Bachmann is a good stand-in, but isn't quite right for any of the Frisco examples that are out there. And so we'll work on modifying those, but they are excellent for operations in terms of working. And the decapods from Bachmann in plastic are also excellent examples for the Frisco in this time and area. Rolling stock. Here are some great resources for rolling stock in the 1920s era. I'm not going to name them all, but I want to thank Eric Hansman for his website and conversations for night cars of the 1920s. Many of the resin models that we have are Westerfield models. AccuRail has recently released some 36-foot box cars that are really just right for this layout. Many of the sources for these 1920 cars, I'll note from Eric, you want to look in the diagrams that you have, not only for the freight cars, but the weathering. You find cars, but a lot of times they're lettered for later eras, and you want to go back and get that lettering right if you're interested in prototype modeling. Here are some examples of models that are available and on the layout. Coal gondolas that predate these steel ones in resin from Westerfield, as well as this great sawtooth boxcar. These are models that were provided to me from Jim James. Several representations of the double sheath AAR boxcar. One most recently released from Rapido is just another excellent model suitable for this layout. Cabooses, often a source of consternation when building a model. There are very few, if any, representations for the Frisco in this era. Here's an old photo of the 777, a blind-in wood caboose that Jim James, I know, has built from scratch a model of. There's out there a A&B kit that is a 3-window wood caboose that is used as a stand-in on the layout, but really it's more appropriate for a late 30s into the 40s when they were built and brought onto the Frisco. And so what I've done is I've looked through the freight car diagrams. Here's an interesting diagram from the prototype, these old Muley cabooses. Brad Sloan had built one of these for the NMRA as a contest model a few years back. And you can use the old roundhouse kits and build some stand-ins that are representative of these types of cabooses: the arch bar, underframe, side door, blind-in cabooses, or with steps or a platform on the end. And these are two that I've detailed and built to serve on the Crawford and Cherokee. Period vehicles are also of interest to many for the 1920s. Here you see is the Jordan miniatures that are out there are great models for the time, and here are a few cars at the local ice house on the Crawford and Cherokee. So what's happening now? What is currently being efforted on the Crawford and Cherokee? Well, we're working hard on structure kits. I spent most of the month of June building and detailing new structures for the layout, refining an operation scheme that allows for 4 or 5 jobs in an afternoon with friends. Circuit breakers for when those friends are over and they short circuit the layout. I had one of the modules off this week, adding in individual circuit breakers to various areas there. And also refining that historical accuracy, going from fun to prototype modeling. And while I'm currently limited to the layout, this is a portable layout that can be taken to shows or other places. And so looking at other sections as opportunities for other elements to model is certainly in the cards. So I've produced just a very short video, and if time permits, we'll switch over to my cell phone camera if there are questions of any particular area, but I'll show this video to give you an idea of what the layout currently looks like, and we'll follow a train through the layout to end our discussion for today. Here you see the layout plan again. We're going to follow a train from the south of Weir City through the town of Weir, back onto the Parsons sub, and into Cherokee. So here we have just a pan across the layout. This movie was taken just today, and you can see that the area in which the layout occupies is very wide open. You have 4 or 5 friends over. There's no narrow aisles, and plenty of room to get around and operate. And the video here includes a snapshot. You can see that I'm building that kit bash of that mine for the Lightning Creek mine on the far end. Here we're following our consolidation out of Weir City, the south of Weir, leaving the brickyard area. And the video is going to just tail this train through the layout. Here we have some stand-ins for the structures that will occupy Weir. We're going by the Y track there in Weir that is used to turn the trains. A station that is a kit that is actually a Missouri, Kansas, Texas depot for the critics out there, but is a very good stand-in for the Weir depot. Here the train is crossing, off the branch line into Weir onto the Parsons sub, passing a wheat field that's been recently cut, pointing us to the fact that it is midsummer here in Kansas. Our ballasted wood trestle over Brush Creek, and then passing the Missouri Pacific interchange, have a few cars waiting there to be given back to the MOPAC. Here our train is taking that interchange from the Parsons sub back onto the Afton sub into the yard at Cherokee. I have not been able to yet build that historic station in Cherokee, so I have my scratch build model of a station from the next town south in Scammon, Kansas, serving as a fill-in. And here our train, you see it entering the yard, some cars parked there on the storage tracks, and then we leave Cherokee heading south on the Afton sub. Okay, so that is just a very quick tour and highlights of the layout. And I think that I'll stop there in the interest of time and tell you thank you. And I want to thank all the folks that I've tried to give a shout out to in the slides here. Maybe didn't mention your name because of my nervousness in presenting, but if you're interested in following along, I do have a slide on an area on MRH on their forums. And you can see occasionally I do still pull out the old transition era stuff and run it. And here was a photo that MRH published from the layout this past winter. Okay, so with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are any there in the chat. Speed?
You got quite a few.
All right.
So first one is when you showed all the photos, did you mention a web page where you got those from?
Yes, I will give Speed these photos to put on the Lone Star area. Many of the photos come from the Kansas Historical Society's website called kansasmemory.org. And again, I encourage you, if you're a fan of, something like the Santa Fe or the Rock Island, as well as the lines that I'm modeling, go there. They have just an outstanding collection of old photographs.
Cool. And someone wanted to know how they could find or gain access to the Sanborn maps.
Yes, the University of Kansas, if you Google University of Kansas Sanborn Map Collection, you will come to that page, or you're welcome to shoot me a note on Facebook and I will point you directly to it. But they have for just about every Kansas town from the turn of the century to around 1920, a great collection.
Cool. How many modules do you have there in total or plan to add?
Yeah, so there are currently about 13 modules. Several of them you may have noticed are paired together semi-permanently into kind of a 7.5 foot length, which is very good for storing on end in the house, where I have a little corral for keeping the modules put away when we want to put cars in the garage. But about a dozen. The plans are I've drawn up a switching layout that is another section of Cherokee, and of course we'd like to represent that turntable and engine house that was there just north of the Diamond in Cherokee, another option to turn the steam locomotives in the area during operations. But right now I'm out of room. Those would require setups at a show or some other area that would host us for an op session.
Sweet. Do any of those wheels have locking mechanisms on them so they don't roll around by themselves?
They do. Every module has at least one locking wheel, and an interesting thing that I learned from Ken is when you have the modules assembled, even if you have 4 or 5 of them connected together, when they're on those casters, you can move them around.
Okay.
And so if you take this layout to a show, you can very rapidly move pieces in large segments. And you can have fun and play Tetris with your modules in the garage if you like, which I've done on many occasions when we wanted to get a car in the garage.
So Ken wanted to know, Brooks wanted to know if the foam is top recessed down into the box. Does the plywood and end plates cover the foam layer, or does the foam extend over the end plates?
Yes, the modules, when constructed, the extruded foam is even with the top of the end plate, and the rigid box, the 1/4-inch plywood on the sides, is also, when built, flush with that pink foam. And so as you build terrain and bring that level down, you also carve into that 1/4-inch plywood to make it even with you want to recess. And then you can add pink foam to the top and give yourself a little more elevation for terrain as well.
And someone noticed that you have some switch stands there. Do they operate with the points, or are they just stationary?
Yeah, those are stationary. Those are Detail West components, but they really make just a very nice scenic element if you're taking photographs, and they look very realistic. But no, they don't operate.
Okay. Are you planning a 2-person cruise during operations?
Yeah, I think that what we're looking at is two-person crews, and then one person to run through the JMRI switch list generator, pulling cars in and out of the staging or the storage, if you will, representing trains that are not modeled but are leaving cars or picking up cars at the interchanges.
Okay. So before I ask the last 2 important questions, someone wants to know how you lock these modules together, and if you've ever taken them to a show to present to the world.
Yeah, we haven't taken them to a show yet. I've offered here in the area, but there hasn't been room in recent shows. The modules are locked together with C-clamps and have alignment pins. So they largely follow the methods that are used by the Sipping and Switching Society for their modules. Really, that was the inspiration for the design.
Okay. Now for the important questions. How often is this layout set up? And when you set it up, does it stay up for a while? So if we wear masks, can we come operate?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit hesitant to have guests right now, but the idea here is that you can work on sections of this layout at any given time with just portions of it set up. So quite often what I do is I set up about half of the layout as a switching layout. So you can imagine either the Cherokee side or the Weir side on its own is just a fine switching layout. Work on the scenery at that time, and then of course set up the whole layout when you have friends over for operating.
Well, Bob, that was the end of the questions, and I think that was just amazing seeing how you can, maybe arm wrestle someone out of your garage and turn it into a train layout.
Well, thanks, Pete, for offering me to present today.
So, thank you very much. We'll let Gordy do the announcements and take it from there.
All right.